Welcome back to another video, and today I'll be showing my favorite holiday palettes. Welcome back, and today we are doing what I would say is my sort of favorite palette favorites type of video that I like doing on my channel. So we are going to be showing my sort of favorites or recommendations for Christmas palettes, and as always these favorites videos are very subjective, so your idea of what kind of ideal Christmas palette would be can be very different from mine. So let's just get that out of the way. Since I've been doing now YouTube for a while, from the palettes that I do have swatches, you are gonna see a small swatch image somewhere around here, but with some of the older palettes it could be that we aren't having swatches, so with some there's gonna be swatches, some don't. I think before we will start talking about the actual palette favorites, I am gonna make one honorable mention. So with these palettes, why you are not probably seeing the newest holiday palettes in these, like my favorites videos usually, because I want to actually try my palettes and then review on them on my channel. So the reason why this is getting an honorable mention is that I just got this into my rotation. This was Cosmic Beauty's holiday launch last year. Actually this year I don't think they are going to be having a holiday launch, because they just, I think, launched their last palette for this year, and it was a sort of death themed palette, but which at least for me didn't scream like it was a holiday launch. So I think this year they were probably not going to have a Christmas specific launch, but last year, and I do think you might be able to get this at least in some places, so this is something that is still currently on my rotation, but I have now, from the 3 demo looks, I have already gotten done 2 already, and I can already say that in terms of quality, very on par with other Cosmic Beauty palettes, and this is probably next year we're gonna have this in the actual video, but for now, because I'm still in the middle of testing this, we put this in the honorable mentions. But as always with this sort of my palette favorites video, we're gonna be going through these from, how we're gonna do this, Drugstore, high-end, and indie, because the indie pile is the biggest. The Drugstore, unfortunately, I only have one recommendation. From high-end we have a couple of things. But let's start going through my sort of favorites or recommendations for the holiday season. So from Drugstore I actually only have one, and this is probably not my sort of absolute favorite formula, but I do think as a color story this fits the season. So this is the Rich Glitch palette, and this is one of the new more physics pans. There's quite a lot of things to consider with this formula, but I do think if you're looking for especially maybe a more cool toned glam palette for the holiday season, I do think this kind of fits the bill. This kind of has a pop of there's the shimmery plum brownish shade over here, and especially if you are into your cool toned holiday glam, I do think you can get a nice look out of this. As I said, not my absolute favorite formula. I do think the new Morphe formula, it's a decent formula, but not the best that I've tried from Drugstore palettes. From these new Morphe palettes, I did think I discussed in my review that I would still prefer the 6-pan ones, even though these are a bit more expensive compared to when you compare the amount of pans you get compared to the price point. But I do think that especially if you use these baked shimmer shades that are included in here with a brush, then you are getting much more a nicer effective look compared to the bigger palettes. But this is the only Drugstore recommendation I have for this particular recommendations video. Okay, and next for the high-end ones, and I don't think there's that lot of difference if you watch these sort of favorites videos from previous year. So first one, again, maybe we'll start with the cool tone one. So this was Chanel's holiday palette a couple of years ago. So this was the Lumiere Graphique, and this is, again, I think this is especially what I would say for those who want a cool tone look, but you don't want straight on gray tones, because this is basically, yeah, you kind of got the black in here, but it's more what I would say this maybe almost rusty leading cool tones is how would I describe this. There isn't a lot of versatility you get this one, but I do think for if you're just someone who likes this very easy, more luxury, high-end satiny formulas, there is a bit sparkle in this one, especially the white shade in this is the kind of more sparkly thing. But this is what I would say, again, for those of you who want a sort of easy, cool toned holiday glam, but you don't want straight out grays. I do think for that one, for that kind of look, this Quint is pretty good. Then a very oldie but a goodie. This is something that I think I will be again using for some of the pre-Christmas parties I'm having during next week. So this is the first Mothership that I think I actually... What's actually the first one that I had? I think the Divine Rose 2 might have been the first one, and the Divine Rose 1 I might have got this afterwards, but anyway. So this again goes to the more it's maybe Some people categorize this as cool tone. I think this is pretty on the nose neutral palette. But I do think what especially makes for me every year this kind of holiday thing is this particular very sparkly shade over here. I think I almost every year do a look where I then end up using this one. So this kind of like has a more, what I would say, it's not as full on like pink gold that especially I think we saw from palettes that will launch after this one. But it is more what I would say a sort of on the middle neutral kind of like purple mauvish thing, and then we kind of have something fun, especially with this kind of shade over here. And while I do think Pat McGrath mattes are definitely my favorite mattes to this date, I do think, considering that this is going to be quite old, I do think the formula generally has lasted pretty well. At least for so far, I haven't like seen signs that this is aging so bad that I would have to declutter this one. Something you should consider if you buy this palette, because you can still get it, but Pat McGrath, the brand, no longer does the special shades. I think this is a licensing thing, so if you didn't know Pat McGrath, I think she's now is she creative director for the Louis Vuitton makeup brand? I think there was something like that, but basically Pat isn't as involved, I think, in her namesake brand as she used to be, and that's, I think, is the reason why if you buy these palettes now, the shimmer formula is going to be a bit different from what it was previously, especially with the ones that had these baked formulas. I do think the baked formula was quite nice, especially considering the time that these were launched when we didn't have yet that many of these special indie shades. But this again will be one of my forever pre-Christmas holiday party favorites. I think for the longest that I'll be able to use that one. Then let's move to maybe to the sort of more warmer neutral side. So this is the Spice palette from ABH. This was her holiday launch. Previous year there was the Sugar, there was the Spice. I do think these palettes were, in terms of formula, the best that we had seen from ABH. Wasn't so excited about ABH's 9 pans that she launched this year. She did come out with 2, but let's just say that compared to those, I do think that at least the shimmer formula in this one seems to be a bit nicer. I think every time I look at this, I'm like I think gingerbreads. It's the first thing that I think about. It could be the packaging, but also the fact that the brown tones these neutral shades here have. The shimmers are also kind of fun. They are sparkly, and they do actually kind of give us something a bit different once you layer them over the matte, so they might not show up on the lids exactly the same as they are in the pans, but that is actually what makes this kind of interesting and brings maybe a bit more versatility, because at the end of the day it's still a 9 pan, pretty monochromatic brown palette. But in terms of like especially the matte formula, I think the mattes in this one, it was the most butteriest ABH matte formula that I had tried from all of her palettes. A bit hard to say that the matte formula translate also to the new 9 pans that she has launched this year. It seems that the shimmers didn't, especially the Emperor palette that was already launched during the I think middle of the fall. I already said when I immediately saw the swatches that I'm buying that because it had these very sort of satiny mattes that I'm thinking still that why can't we have these pretty shimmers in her like new palettes also, because I do think the shimmer formula, it was pretty awesome. Then the sort of big category of indie palettes, and I have 3 Odin's Eye palettes in this one, so sorry for all of those, but Odin's Eye have been they've been doing pretty decent. Unfortunately, this year's Odin's Eye holiday palette, it was a skip for me. I didn't like the pastel color undertones that were included, and I also don't like the concept that they were doing these like huge palettes. First one is the palette I'm actually wearing today. So last year's holiday palette we got 2, and the one that made it to my sort of Christmas favorites is this one from them. So this is the Silver Replaced palette, and I think if you're especially into your grungy and reddish tones, this might be a holiday palette for you. I'm a bit unsure, can you still get these, or did these actually sell out during last year? The holiday palettes usually have been a limited edition launch, so I'm a bit unsure, can you still get this one? There was also a Rose Jingles palette that came along with this one, but that is exclusively a spring palette for me. If you have seen the color story, you will probably know what I'm talking about. But for Christmas, this one I can actually see, because it kind of has, especially if you really like your sort of reds and if you want something a bit more grungier, I do think for that kind of Christmas person, this is actually a pretty good palette. Then a palette from their new seasonal collection, and this is still available. So this is technically an Alva winter palette. They came out with like a full range of 4 of these palettes. I think it was a bit ridiculous how many palettes were launched at once. And for me, this is the kind of that if you don't want this on the nose red and green Christmas palettes, but you might want something bit in between. So this kind of has the fun thing that it's a bit more like, you have the sort of wintry cool tones in this one, especially in the form of purples, but then you actually do have like this sort of deep green and cranberry shades over here. And that is why for me this actually, that I was kind of thinking that okay, I'm gonna put this into my winter favorites, because that is also obviously a we're gonna be seeing that in months time, probably in my channel, or is this a Christmas palette? So this is actually something that might go in between to both sort of like favorite categories, because I can see this, and when I reviewed this I did say that I can kind of see the winter, but I can kind of also see that for Christmas season, because it has the sort of cranberry and deep green road in the like this section over here. In terms of quality, I did say that this wasn't maybe the best in terms of the fact that Woodlands has produced, but it's still a pretty decent palette, like decent quality and definitely usable. And then the sort of ultimate palette, and everyone's always like asking that can we get this palette in, especially in the formula that these were produced in back. So this is the Merry Christmas palette, the Christmas Eve palette. If you've been watching my sort of like palette favorites video, you do know that I do usually include the Christmas Eve in my winter rankings because it's a more cool tone, but this is the ultimate on the nose Christmas palette that I always do critique a little bit, but for me it's purely because it's enough to have one or two this kind of palettes in my collection. I then have my fill of this on the nose Christmas palette. So I have always said that my biggest issue with this one is that I kind of use this in sections. I either use the green sections, I kind of use the red separately. For me, mixing this red and greens, I have tried it a few times, but unfortunately my makeup skills even though I do think I'm pretty decent at creating eyeshadow looks, I'm maybe not that creative of a person that I can fully like combine this. But even in using this as separate like greens and reds, I do think this is beautiful. The shimmers, the mattes, I just wish, because I do think that especially after these Christmas palettes were launched, we then kind of started seeing a bit maybe hits and misses with the formulas. And it could be that they had to change the labs or the manufacturing facilities, which has maybe impacted why we, for some reason these days, some Oden's eye palettes are good and then some are not so good. But these holiday palettes in the particular formula, these were originally made in, because I got mine when these were launched the first time, the best formulations they had like ever done. And for me, this will be forever one of my sort of probably favorites. And I mean, like, look at the packaging, like you can't get any more Christmassy than this one. Then I would say that if you want something very impactful and blingy, and I do think that, okay, it's a bit late to say this because by the time this video goes up, the Black Friday sale is already over, but this is the Molten Metals palette. This was Gloss Gods' holiday palette actually from last year. And while this as a color story, I don't think it's anything that special. It's a pretty like traditional neutral palette. You kind of have a bit cool tone and warm tone neutrals mixed within this one, but the shimmers in this one are the most impactful shimmers. It's like almost this molten metallic formula is how I would maybe describe this. And these are the kind of shimmers that are going to make people ask that what are you wearing on your eyes. I do think there's also a downside for that for some people these might be already too impactful, and I do think that if you suffer from very textured eyelids, then these shimmers are not going to look flattering on everyone. But I do think that if you want very impactful this sort of, if your holiday Christmas season glam means that you put because I do know a lot for many people it can be that they put a neutral on the crease and then they want a very pow impactful shimmer, then this is the kind of palette that I would say that you will enjoy. But as I said, the shimmer formula, it might, for some people it might already go too far, but if you just want like neutral metallic sparkly goodness on your eyelids, then I do think this is still a very good option. And this is already, like as I said, this is still available. If you did manage to snag this on Black Friday sale, you probably got a pretty good deal. I think this was like 50% off, but also because it doesn't have, this is a smaller palette format than some of their previous palette, it is a bit more inexpensive compared to the other palettes. Then something that I think I actually forgot this on my Valentine's ranking during, like Valentine's favorites video during this year, but this is the kind of palette that I think you can go to both like Christmas and Valentine's. So this is the Petit Boop palette from Glamlight, and I think the obvious reason why this is kind of why I'm saying this could go to both is this one. So this is a pretty traditional, it's this sort of like red palette combined with some mauves and browns. And I do think in terms of formula, this is one of the better formula Glamlight has done. Again, a bit sorry, I'm a bit unsure, can you still like find this, but I do think, especially the shimmers in this one, I was like, wow, that a Glamlight, especially at their price point, can do this, do like something like this. I always say the background makes this even look maybe a bit more redder than it actually is, but you do certainly have your neutral options. So I think for those of you, is Christmas makeup means like very nice sparkly shades with like pop of red, but also you do kind of have like, want to have your mauves and neutrals to not have your looks too popping. I do think this might be a good like in-between palette for many people. And then for the last one, so this was something that was in my fall ranking, but I do think actually from the like these sort of spicy neutral palettes that we saw a lot, especially during the beginning of this year and at the end of 2024, I think this was the one that I think is most suitable, at least for my sort of holiday preferences. So this is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. They did actually launch a like Christmas palette also for this season, but I discussed on my makeup news video, I wasn't such a big fan of the color combo. Why this sort of made it into this sort of like why I wanted to include in this particular recommendations video was that because I do feel that we kind of have this sort of like burgundy deep row over here, and then combined with these shimmers, this is one of the I think smoothest and one of the I think from in the shimmers like the in a different way one of the better shimmer like best shimmer formulas that I've tried, because this is, even though it's a very sparkly shimmer formula, it doesn't emphasize textures, it doesn't crease, it doesn't do funny things on your lid, and the sparkle is just, it's so beautiful. So again, if you like your sort of like very easy holiday glam party looks, I think you would enjoy this formula a lot. The matte formula is also more buildable, so I think for a lot of people this could be a good entryway into indie brands, because it is a more of a easy to work with matte formula that you can like you have to build it a bit more, but I do know that a lot of people also, they necessarily don't want this pigmented on the bam on the go mattes, but they also want something more workable. So I think there is quite a lot of wide range of makeup consumers that would actually enjoy the Glaminatrix formula. I do think their pricing, at least in Monolith shop, if you shop this within European Union, like Glaminatrix's palettes aren't actually that expensive. They go around 50 euros, which for indie brands, and especially like for example with this palette, considering how many shades you're getting, I do think for comparing that we have indie brands that charge like 60, 70, 80 or even 90 euros. I think for compared to that one, this is a very like, I would say more like accessible. But yeah, for those of you maybe who are looking for kind of like something more neutral leaning, but you might be want some maybe like more what I would say maybe like muted colors, this could be a very good like nice option for your holiday makeup looks. Those were my recommendations for Christmas palettes for this year. Comment down below maybe your top 3 Christmas palettes, and maybe has there been some new favorites, or are you maybe sticking with the palettes that you already have in your collection. If you like this video, push the like button, subscribe to the channel, or ring the bell button if you want to get notifications from future content. You can also find me with the same nickname, Makeup Hedgehog, on Instagram. I'll see you in another video. Bye bye!